bright on the stream. You think it?
I think it looks dark on the stream, but anyway, we can sort that out later.
Nah, I reckon it's good. It could be brighter, but right now it's fine. It just needs more fill on the face stuff, I think.
More fill on the face. I'm going to leave that one alone.
All right. I think we're appearing on everything, so that's good. All right. Hello. Welcome to the first Frights weekly chat. I'm Josh. This is Simon. We're part of a band called FRIGHTS. One of our members is not here today. His name's Matt, and he'll be in later broadcasts when we're talking more about music and making music and things like that. So what we're getting started with today is a kind of a soft launch of what we're planning to work towards. We've been writing a lot of music behind the scenes and doing other work around the industry, but this is kind of our first step into actually pushing stuff out ourselves. And part of what we're doing is talking to people about it as we're doing it, going through all the hurdles that come up when you are making music and what are the challenges and how to do it, and, you know, kind of just staying on top of things and actually seeing how from a viewer's perspective or an audience perspective, how much work actually goes into this stuff. Because I think there's this prevailing idea that it just kind of happens. You don't really, logic kind of dictates that a lot of work goes into this stuff, but you don't get to see it, and therefore your brain doesn't really kind of process it that way. So we're kind of doing it as a means to kind of demonstrate that, and also for us to be accountable for what we're doing, because we want to share what we've been doing, and this will help us do that. So that's kind of a general introduction to what we're doing, I think. We're going to go deeper into it, and we're going to go into finessing the details a little bit more as we pass through these streams, which will happen weekly, along with some music stuff, writing, like sitting in on our writing sessions, and some other interesting bits of content as we continue production on Frights. So that's where we're at. Do you have anything to add to that, Simon?
Not really, apart from I think as in terms of the makeup of the band, it's a bit of an unusual way to go about it. We've all had different careers out in the world, and across different aspects of creativity. I'm not a musician. I've got no idea what I'm doing in a band.
Yeah.
But I come from a marketing background, and I've got, strong writing skills. I've been a music nerd my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And have strong opinions about what good looks like. So in some ways, I'm playing fifth Beatle, third Frights member, in that way.
Yeah.
With a view to, I suppose, expanding the idea of what it means a little bit to be a member of a band.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really really common from what I've observed of artists and acts out in the industry, that they have these people that they rely on every day as part of the operations of the band, but they're not, in inverted commas, members of the band.
Yeah.
And then alternatively, you've seen other bands play with this idea in the past, like the Polyphonic Spree always spring to mind. They've got, or even bands like Tism. Yeah, you've got these sort of permanent dancers or other.
Brockhampton would be another one where it's hip hop artists, video producers, etc., etc.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. These more collectivist sort of approaches to music making. So I'm having to get comfortable with that idea.
I'm having to get comfortable with sitting here and talking on a stream. I think it's something that I've wanted to do for a long time, having watched and interacted with a lot of other very comfortable in front of a camera performing artists, and kind of always gone, oh man, it'd be really great to do that, because my background is music and broadcast. So if you're an Australian, everyone will know Triple J. And I spent a lot of time with their live music team, along with our national broadcaster here, the ABC, which is the equivalent of the BBC in Australia, and doing music broadcast and sports broadcast and talent, like working with a lot of on-air talent and seeing how natural they make it seem was really kind of inspiring, and now I'm kind of coming into doing it myself is bizarre.
Which is absolutely part of the reason to do this, right? If you want to build that proficiency, you've got to do the thing.
Yeah.
It seems straightforward to say it, but then you've actually got to do it.
Well, and that kind of like takes us like that kind of is one of the points that we'll be kind of quite often talking about around the band, I guess, as well, because these things, they don't just happen, and it does take a lot of work to do them. So, I think there's, like I said before, there's this perception that it just kind of happens. And even today, getting to this point where we are in this stream has taken us 2 weeks to kind of get off our asses and actually do it. And I would argue even longer if we were to take the inception of the idea of the Frights faceless band thing.
Well, yeah, even just conceptually to go from this idea of, oh, we want to make music as a band, let's make the music and then put the music out.
Yep.
And digging deeper and going below that surface level and going, well, actually, what does success look like? What do we want to achieve? And then designing a path toward that success. And being realistic and then wanting to take those steps while also having the humbleness to be like, we don't know what we're doing. We need to figure that out. We need to be prepared to make mistakes, be prepared to come across as absolute nuggets.
Yeah. And I mean, that's why we're doing these live streams as well, is so that you get to see that, as it's happening.
Oh, show you working, yeah. Oh, also, the idea of when we've observed bands, because we've spent
a lot of time
a lot of time with them through our various bits of work. To the people in the band, all these things, the act of making the music and talking about the music and thinking about it and performing it and all this stuff is so incredibly meaningful to them because they are in it all the time.
Yeah.
And they have in-jokes and they have this real familial sort of connection going on between them. But that it's hard to extend that to the audience. They get little glimpses of it in live performance, and they get whatever media the band are capable of putting out, normally through press and whatever else. But to be able to extend that and build that in from the start, I think is potentially a really powerful thing.
Yeah.
So having a swing at doing that through these sort of things and bringing people along into those in jokes and into the fun. Yeah. Into the fun of the actual making of stuff. Yeah. Is a powerful thing to be able to do.
Yeah, and I think the other part of it is normalizing these conversations around things outside of the making of the music that oh, careful there. These
the destroying of the equipment.
The destroying of the equipment, yeah. The bringing people into these conversations that happen around the music that might usually be done by record labels or management or whatever, that musicians in our experience and bands, find it very difficult to engage with. And, this is also from my perspective as well, because having these conversations even a year ago was quite challenging to me. I'm very open to new ideas, so it definitely didn't, I wasn't kind of backing away from the new, different perspectives. But I think it's important to have a sustainable career as an artist. Forget about musicians, but for the moment, but let's just talk about all creative pursuits. If you're going to have a successful career, depending on what success means to you, but let's say sustainable career, so that you can come back and do it every day, you can't just make the stuff. The making of the stuff is half or less than half of what you need to be doing.
Yeah, it's way less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, for some artists, quite a challenging thing, because you've got to get your work in front of people, you've got to network, and you have to make friends, and you have to collaborate, and you have to get out in the world, and that was one of my mistakes over the last couple of years, was I kind of isolated myself working on some of this stuff, and lost touch with the wider world, and people forgot who I was, which is, not that I kind of walk around with a bloody, like celebrity following me around, because I'm not, that's definitely not what's happening here. But even the couple of people that I knew, I wasn't in their mind because I hadn't seen them for a beer at the pub a couple of weeks ago, and they just forget.
Yeah.
And so when opportunities come up, they think of the last person they talk to rather than me,
Mm. Yeah, primacy and recency is the behavioral science stuff there. The first thing and the most recent thing are the ones that you remember. So they'll always remember the people that got them into the industry or gave them their first leg up and whatever.
Yeah.
But the only other people they're going to tend to remember are the most recent ones.
Yeah.
It's really hard to transition into being these like cornerstone people. And the only way to do it is to have consistent contact.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, another reason for what we're doing here, so we're kind of always out in the world and popping up on people's streams. So what we're kind of doing is meta, we're kind of demonstrating what we would what we would hope to see from artists out in the world, but also for ourselves, it works in a couple of different ways.
Yeah. Which, I guess that moves us to the next section of the notes.
Yeah.
Is that like why the hell do a live stream?
Well, maybe
people who are making music.
I mean, can we take just one step back, because we haven't really talked about what the hell Frights is, really.
Okay.
Like we've alluded to it being a band, but we haven't really talked about kind of the concept behind it and whatever. So just
the wanky bit,
winding
it
back.
Is that
well,
right?
That's my favorite part. You can talk about why we're doing the streams and stuff, because that's your favorite part. But my favorite part, the bit that gets for me for filming, is the making part. I mean, this does too, but the making part is certainly why I'm here.
Go on then.
All right. So what is Frights? So Frights is effectively a faceless band. Like we kind of we've got big, grand Delulu ambitions of kind of being a Gorillaz or a Daft Punk or a Tame Impala. These are all bands which kind of front as or artists that front with kind of like a layer of ambiguity. Their faces aren't plastered all over the literature and stuff. It's more about the characters and the aesthetic that they create around their music than them as actual creators. And the reason that that's quite appealing to me is that it allows us to kind of adapt and change over time. I feel like people who kind of personalize their bands or their creative acts, they tend to be stuck in those places and aesthetics for a long time, and it doesn't give this. It basically allows easier chances to jump genres and all that kind of stuff, and grow and change and all that.
I'm not sure I agree with that at all, but anyway.
Well, I mean, genre's dead. Genre doesn't exist. We can get into all that later. I'm sure we'll talk about that over time. But basically, Frights exists to be able to kind of do things like that. And it also is kind of an ambition of myself and Matt's to just write some of our own music, because we've all written with other artists and with our own little acts over the last decade, I guess, to very, very little success, because we're not, we didn't do any of this stuff. We just made music. And we wanted to kind of do something that kind of incorporated not just the music but all these other aspects. So Frights is a faceless band in that respect, and it can evolve and change as it needs to over time, and be guided and all that jazz.
I suppose just to clarify as well, if it's not clear, we haven't put anything out yet.
Yeah, that's true. We have stuff. But that's why we're starting now.
Says every artist ever.
Yeah, true. We do have
You
stuff.
haven't seen the best stuff. It's in the vault.
It's in the vault, yeah. We don't have a vault. It's just like a waste paper basket or a little picnic basket that we've thrown it all in. It kind of evolved. Frights evolved. The idea was there at the start. The idea of the Faceless Band, but we hadn't really figured out how we were going to do it. And over the last couple of years, we've been running this little grassroots kind of program called Friday Night Lights, which we won't be calling that moving forward, but right now we're going to call it FNL. Basically what that was is just an excuse to get into the studio and make something that wasn't really for anything, without intending to release it, with no real rules other than just to make something and follow a vibe. That's not very much, like, part of that is kind of where the fulfillment comes from for making music for me. But when we're talking about effectively designing music for an audience, it becomes problematic. So we'll get into that a bit later. But the music that we have right now came all out of those sessions, and they were collaborations between myself and Matt and a whole heap of other local artists to where we are. The sessions were really interesting. They were a lot of fun. We were able to, transfer skills to other people who we were working with, which was another reason for doing it, because we had a lot of young people around, and a couple of older people who'd done this for, a long time. So there was an opportunity to train some people up, and
it was a great community thing. But it made it clear that the collaborative aspects and the having a strong direction are things that are kind of hard to manage. The more direction you have, the more you have to direct the collaboration.
Yeah.
And the more wildly open and free the collaboration is, the less direction that you have.
Yeah.
So consolidating those two ideas has been part of the core challenge of what making these songs that are in the picnic basket has been.
Yeah, so we did that for a couple of years, and it kind of, without the intention of releasing anything. And then we did it in seasons. So at the end of the first season, we looked at what we'd done and decided that we wanted to produce it up into something that we could release and share with people. And that was a little while ago at this point. And between then and season 2 and season 3, we kind of came to this turning it into something that we focus a lot of our time on, rather than doing the facilitation work we were doing before, which effectively being mix engineers or songwriters or producers with other artists. We want to do that with ourselves, if that makes sense, and still work with other people through this project, I think, is the idea. As I was saying, we're kind of culturally aligning ourselves with acts like Gorillaz and Daft Punk, and Tame Impala and those kinds of acts, and we aspire to be as incredibly exciting and innovative culturally as those acts were. I'm sure there's other bands and groups that kind of will come up over our conversations and over our discussions around what we're doing, but at the moment that's the kind of idea. Do you want to talk about the energy? The vibe.
The energy. Yeah. All right. So, again, more context here. So we, and at some point we'll have to spend some time taking stock of the things that we've got and the things we need to do. But one of the, I guess, central advantages of the thing that we're doing here is that we have access to a recording studio. We've been running a recording studio for a couple of years now. And we have, obviously, access to it all the time. So at one point, we had a number of employees. We've toyed around over the last couple of years with having a larger set of employees and a smaller set. And at one point, we had an employee who said that whenever they come in, it feels like stepping into a never-ending sleepover. And it was the perfect little term that we've since built. I guess a lot of the ideas around is, does this contribute to the feeling of the never ending sleepover or not? and it's become this real kind of north star of what we're doing. So the never ending sleepover energy is the overall vibe. I've got a never ending sleepover playlist of music that
I
fits
think
that.
we're all going to do one of those. So.
Yeah, at some point I think we should. But that central energy is what we're trying to build around.
Mm-hmm.
And again, even this like the reason for doing live streams of bringing people into that never-ending sleepover energy is it gives us that opportunity to layer in those in jokes and the internal culture and the meta culture of the artistic output, as well as all the other reasons. So I just want to run through those actually. So because it's, I think for even just getting our own heads around what we're doing, which we're still very much in the process of.
Yeah.
The reason that I think any creative person should be doing live streams is most like the top level reason should be accountability. It's so easy to fall into that trap of what we were just speaking about of I've made something, it's out in the vault. Whereas if you've set this expectation, this agreement with yourself that you're going to show up every week and talk about what you've done and show what you've done in different ways, we'll be doing other live streams beyond just this, whether it's rehearsal, whether it is studio time, whether it's whatever.
Yeah.
Let's practice and do a cover.
Yeah.
All of these things.
Remixes and actually coming into the songwriting process with us. So this session that we have previously been calling FNL will be something that everyone will get invited into, whether it'll be live to begin with or not. That's something we're still figuring out. But
so that accountability aspect of showing those things off is massive, because it means that you can't, I'll do it next week, or I don't feel up to it today, or...
Well, how many times did we say that in the last couple of weeks? Like, I don't know if it was me or both of us, but I think at least I remember saying it a few times. Oh, we'll do it tomorrow. We'll do it tomorrow. We'll do it tomorrow. It was me. Yeah. It was also we weren't ready, like actually equipment.
Legitimately, we hadn't cabled things up.
There was work to do technically, but we were faffing about with deadlines and that accountability kept shifting. We kept because we're only accountable to ourselves, we kept shifting the goalpost, and it's not ideal.
Yeah. So having a schedule and being accountable to that, including when things get released, because we'll have made promises. Yeah, is massive. Yeah, massive for accountability and momentum. Yeah, right. Being the next thing is that.
Well, we're more likely to get into the studio and finish something, write something, practice, play, invite collaborators, blah 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 blah. If we've got a forcing deadline looming upon us, without trying to kill ourselves, obviously, but at the same time, a little bit of stress, kind of forged the diamonds.
Pressure makes diamonds. That's the one.
Yeah. And that's certainly been a challenge. There was only really one time in my creative career where I was able to kind of force myself with my own accountability, like being accountable to myself, and that was during COVID when there was no other distractions, really. There was an opportunity to build some really great habits and not be distracted by
make
the broader
some sourdough
world.
and
No, I didn't do that. I didn't make any sourdough. Do you make sourdough?
No, neither do I. Was actually reflecting with someone just yesterday about that like my sourdough and whatever else, the different coffees, and I didn't get into any of that stuff because it was I was supporting other people's businesses who were going through crisis. So I worked my absolute ring off.
Well, I did too in a different way, but not like I did on music, but it was all for myself. I didn't help anyone else. Yeah, right. Because at the time I was a freelancer, and I was working in a facilitation entertainment industry that stopped when COVID stopped. I started, so I did the thing that I wanted to do. Yeah.
So anyway, point 3 of why doing it is building this proficiency, right? So we kind of mentioned that off the cuff before, but it's been a long time since I've spoken into a microphone. Yeah.
And I always feel like I sound like a drunk baby near a microphone. Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Drunk baby energy.
Drunk baby energy. That's it.
How do you know what a drunk baby sounds like?
I don't know. I don't know. I haven't fed alcohol to babies.
Yeah, plausible deniability there. Ooh.
Oh, easy, Tiger. Calm down.
But yeah, I mean, if the intention is, if we are going to be realistic about having lofty ambitions of building a band that has some level of cultural impact, there's an expectation that means getting in front of interviewers. It means getting press engagements. It means being able to sit and talk about the things that we're creating in a way that flows, in a way that isn't full of ums and ahs, in a way that is naturalistic. And we don't have that currently.
No, I mean,
so
look at us today.
Yeah, absolute idiots.
Yes.
And yeah, just trying to be humble about that and understand that that's part of the process. And we're going to suck before
media training. Media training through practice.
Yeah, but the first step at being kind of good at something is being crap at something.
Yeah.
So.
Which again is kind of funny because I've trained people to be in front of cameras, and I've trained people and cross-trained people from other disciplines that get in front of cameras. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it gives.
But again, like that was what 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
But I mean, just my recent activities kind of demonstrate that it kind of doesn't go away, particularly if you've been doing it for a while. It just lays dormant in your mind a bit.
Like
or
riding a bicycle.
In mine, yeah. Like riding a bicycle. Yes, exactly.
So yeah, this is us getting up to speed.
So proficiency.
And then of course, the being more connected to the audience.
Yep.
That seems to be pretty straightforward. It's part of building an audience.
Mm-hmm.
We've in the work that we've done with bands, we've seen band after band do this poorly, and it's always frustrating because a lot of times the music's great, the music's fine.
Yeah, and the music's really good.
And deserves a bigger audience.
Yep.
But if there's been no audience building activity beforehand or during the release or after, then you can't have the surprise Pikachu face when you get like 1,000 streams and then it's dead in the water.
Yeah.
And there's just nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really not hard to find lots of examples of musicians who have done that and then turned it around. Even they've pushed a song for years and tried to find an audience and a home for it, and then it finally hits. I mean, Kiss from a Rose is my favorite. Kiss from a Rose
is a good example of that. Yeah. What a tune!
Yeah, great tune.
What a tune!
But a tune that none of us would know if it weren't for the fact that it was put in a movie in the early 90s.
A Batman movie.
Yeah. What year was that? Was that 80s or 90s?
No, it was 90s. It was like 90. Fuck, I don't know. 95. Let's have a look. Kiss.
It's not important anyway.
I know, but it's good to look this stuff up. 1994. First release. That was when it was released.
I know the director's name starts with an S. Schumann, Shaw something.
Yeah, something like that. There's a Joel Schumacher.
There you go.
It. Yeah, so the second version was directed by Joel Schumacher and has so that's the music video. So it ended up going on the credits of Batman Forever.
Yeah.
So
which is where the song really
big movie.
Before that it had some mediocre reception. No one really knew what to do with it. Yeah, because that was if it was released in 94 and Batman Forever was 95, so like the next year. Yeah.
So even this has happened more recently too. Like this Melbourne group called Shouse. I don't know if you've heard of them. They had a hit. Well, they didn't have a Shouse. Let me look them up. Duo. Yeah. So Love Tonight was their big single, which actually came out in 2017, but it didn't get picked up by the general public until a bit later on. 2021 was when it got really big. So released in 2017, and then a French DJ picked it up and started spinning it in Europe and did a remix, and all of a sudden out of nowhere, and that was 4 years. Imagine having a burn time of 4 years. I don't think people can really.
Maroon 5 are another example of this. They had like 2 albums that did nothing. I think they had a name change or something in there as well.
Yeah.
And the same deal, the album number 3 comes out and it languishes.
Mm-hmm.
But through pushing it and finding an audience for it and finding a home for it, that's where it took off. So that's as we said before, like the
Cara's Flowers. That was
the
their
original
first
name.
band. Yeah.
But the point is though that the making of the music, it's not even really that important what the music is. The music becomes a totem for other types of meaning.
Yeah.
And that finding of an audience is as much a part of the work, and that building of meaning is as much a part of the work as the making of the thing.
Yeah.
And of course, as people who are interested in making things, it's so easy to get caught up in that part of it. So forcing ourselves to engage consistently and give ourselves ways to strive for quality in those other aspects is another part of the reason for doing it.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I enjoy doing this anyway. Like this kind of
Pontificating.
discourse is what I was going for.
Navel gazing.
That's it, sure. I mean, like, these kinds of conversations for me are where the ideas kind of start to percolate and develop, you know, and that's why I like talking to people.
And again, it's a core part of being in that part of sitting around and chatting and figuring out what's meaningful
Going to the pub, going to the bar.
But it's part of the experience for any person who makes music.
Yeah.
Whether it happens in a lounge room smoking weed or it happens in a classroom because you've all taken music
Same course, yeah.
music courses together.
Yeah.
That it is where a lot of this stuff comes from in the initial stages.
What are some bands that have come out of those kinds of environments? The classroom.
Ballpark Music's a good one.
Ballpark Music.
They were thrown together in a high school classroom.
Is Middle Kids kind of like that?
Not sure.
I don't know. Like, some of them are siblings, so that.
I thought aren't two of them married?
Or maybe the two of them are married. Maybe that's what it is. Yeah, but those kinds of bands doing, you know, coming out of those cultural environments. It doesn't necessarily have to be a classroom necessarily, but just people who hang out all the time. You know?
Yeah. Life Without Buildings was that way. One of my favorite bands, obscure as hell, but they all went to art school together. A lot of art rock bands are like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how some of these visual artists end up being musicians by accident. You know.
Oh well, yeah. There's huge overlap, I think, in the way that these things are made. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about what is valuable in rap music, specifically, and I can't remember exactly how it was put, but it was something along the lines of it's about who can say something the hardest while still being nonchalant. Or who can do the wittiest wordplay.
Yeah. And
those are kind of like the two metrics by which as a listener, that at least for this person, that's what they're looking for, right? And when we're talking about wittiness, it's ideas like reference and it's things like that. And it struck me that that's exactly the way the art world works. That in visual art, and when I say art world, that's what I'm talking about, right? That you've got when you go to a gallery, if you're just a punter, and you're looking at these great contemporary works and being a little bit confused, it's because there's this whole conversation that's going on in the background that you haven't been privy to, right? Like, and it's about this network of references and quite often silliness. Like they're often those references are funny. And if you're someone who's been steeped in the art world and kind of knows all the references and things, you walk around the gallery and you have a chuckle to yourself at catching these references, and that's where the value is when you see these works that seem on their face quite simple or a bit obtuse and you feel a bit excluded from the club. That's part of the in-group out-group thing that works exactly the same way in rap music. So I think there's huge parallels in general, but that was one that jumped out to me as being an oddly specific thing.
Yeah.
Which was enjoyable. But yeah, being able to bring people in on that.
Yeah.
One of my
everyone becomes part of the in joke.
Exactly.
Because they're part of the band.
Yeah.
Effectively.
Well, Kind of, yeah.
Oh.
Well, they get that priviness. They're in the classroom.
They're in the club. Yeah, they're in the secret
Yeah.
club. Yeah.
And postmodern authors do this as well. Like it's there's this connectedness across all the people who make things.
Yeah, I mean,
artists,
I
if you
reckon
wanna call them.
musicians do it too. I mean, what's his name? The guy who does the loops. What's his name?
Fred again.
No, not
No.
Fred again. He came up during COVID as well. He's always wearing bathrobes and not wearing much.
Oh, Mark Rebier.
Rebier, yeah, like his kind of in-joke things. They're very much out in the
Yeah,
world for
definitely.
everyone to see. I always forget his name. But it's amazing.
But the whole like performing things outside has been part of the extension of that, right? It very much highlights the out group. You know,
Yeah.
someone who's screaming at the top of their lungs over these loops in
Yeah.
a bathrobe, and a lot of them are
On the street
and are quite explicit. Like it makes it
or
so
in
that
some weird pub. Yeah.
but it makes the out group much more obvious.
Yeah.
Which of course makes the in group stronger.
Yeah.
So doing more of that connectedness. I think another motivator here is to show our working, right? We're going to make mistakes and we're going to do things that are counterproductive and stupid in retrospect.
Yeah.
But maybe make sense at the time.
And that's going to be part of these weekly chats, like, what worked, what didn't, how we felt about it, the emotional kind of roller coaster that was the week of making shit or being an artist. These are things that we're going to be talking about in these conversations every week.
Yeah. Because ultimately, we don't know what we're doing.
No.
We've, to some extent,
I mean, we do kind of.
Josh and Matt have both been in bands before. I haven't, and have had no interest in being in one.
Weird how that happens.
Well, look, I'm a critic at heart. I accept that.
Yeah, you are.
I'll cop to it. I'll wear it. But Matt's been in a I guess a relatively successful band, a band that has had breakthrough
in Australia. Yeah.
But realistically, we don't know if we knew how to click our fingers and turn someone into an overnight success, we'd just do that.
Yeah.
But we don't know. So
well,
and try
if,
things and
if that could be a thing that could be done, everyone would be doing it and it wouldn't be a thing,
Well, I don't know. I tend to think that it probably is something that's quantifiable and can be understood and and can be done. And there probably are people out there who are great practitioners at doing that thing.
I would say if we're going to like point to specific people, I can't remember his name, the manager of Gautier and John Butler and Silverchair, that guy.
The manager?
Yeah, their manager. I can't remember his name. I'm going to look it up real quick. If I'm not mistaken, 11 Music. I think that's them. Gautier. I can't remember how to spell Gautier. There it is.
Gotye.
Yeah, that's it. John Watson, that's his name.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, like he's had, significant success with several big international acts across his career, with Silverchair, Gautier, John Butler. Who else we got here? Missy Higgins, though I don't know if she's got the international acclaim that that I think people think. But also Birds of Tokyo.
She deserves it. She's good.
Yeah, she is. Birds of Tokyo, Cold Chisel, big Australian bands that did well on the international stage and are still kicking around for the most part today, in various forms, whether they're in front of it, like forefront in the audience's minds or not. But people like John demonstrate these kind of ideas that we're talking about. They're not going to tell you what they're doing because why? That's their thing,
Yeah, they got the secret sauce.
They got the secret sauce, and people like the people like Tones and I's team, for instance, could be another example of that because she went from basically being a street performer to being number one in 30 countries without a record label in 6 months, and like, sure, she's a great performer, but that like she was greatly performing on the streets and not hitting that level of success. Not that is necessarily the desire of every single musician, but you know, if you want to get if your goal is to write a number one, these kind of ideas are important, you know. And busking on the streets of Byron's for pennies, that's not going to get you to that level necessarily, unless you're incredibly lucky. Though I would say that she was very lucky.
Yeah, I mean, luck obviously plays a part.
Yeah, but you know, her team, and particularly the music lawyer, I can't remember his name either, who discovered her. You know, there's a certain amount of know-how there to understand how the industry works, to talk to the right people, and et cetera, so forth. You know.
Yeah. So part of the recipe is almost certainly industry connectedness.
Yeah, which is something we've been talking about quite a bit recently.
Yeah, and again, like if we're going to draw up a chart of the things that we have and we still need to build, like that's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Both yourself and Matt have pretty significant industry contacts,
Mhm.
but at the same time, there can always be more.
Yeah.
There's a
And
lot
I mean, I've been doing that. That's been one of my goals for the last couple of months because, well, we've been figuring out what we're going to do. Not necessarily with that, but in Australia, the music industry's seen a big shift in the last couple of months. And the way that stuff is being produced is significantly changed. And
festivals have all gone extinct.
Yeah, and large format, multi-day, multi-genre festivals in Australia are basically probably no more for the meantime. Having two of the biggest ones disappear in the last 6 months, and even some of the ones that tour regionally that were backed by government money also falling over because there just wasn't a demand for it. And that's a great conversation in itself, and I'm sure we might talk about it at some point. But as a result of that, you know, we were affected by that because a lot of our work was in that area. So coming into this more quieter time in a similar way to COVID, we've had this opportunity to kind of talk around these ideas, you know.
Right. So to recap,
yes,
that's why those are the 6 ideas that are why we're doing this. So accountability, momentum, skill building,
yep,
audience connection,
yep,
figuring out how to actually do the thing,
yep,
and showing the work, trying things, having fun,
yep, and bringing exactly, yep.
Yeah. So, I guess.
Well, let's talk about. well, I can lead on the next point, which is like, what are we going to be sharing with our audience? Because I think that's a big part of the fronting of this is like what you guys are going to get to see,
and something that will continue to develop over time as well. Like again, we don't know.
And we'll probably have this conversation again over and over and over in periods, because at the moment we're kind of living in a soft launch.
More entertaining versions of this conversation.
Yes, and maybe more concise, more figured out. You know, because we are living in a soft launch right now scenario. We're not technically launched yet, and we're doing this for proficiency right now. So we have. Simon has drawn up a incredibly detailed and crazy production schedule for that's kind of centers around each tune that we intend to release. So with at least from the start, the intention is that we're going to be going on an 8-week cycle. Now, right now, we haven't started that first 8-week cycle yet, but effectively the 8-week cycle will start probably in the next 4 weeks for the first release. While we build up these technical things and make sure that we're able to put out the content that we need to put out and build proficiency around that. So we've built a pretty hectic production schedule that includes a combination of things. The first one being a weekly conversation along these lines, that kind of we check in, we see how things are going, what happened in the week. You know, what we were able to achieve, what kind of fell over, and what we kind of feel shit about, and how can we fix that for next time, and being very honest about those interactions, because to be honest, I think one of the big sacrifices being a practicing artist is this kind of mental stability thing. I don't know how it is for you, but for me, certainly the engagement in creating things has a certain amount of frustration and uncertainty that goes along with it that can be quite difficult to deal with mentally, and that's certainly a problem that I have. So just talking about this stuff openly, I think, is really important. So we're going to be doing that in these weekly discussions. We're going to be talking about metrics. So yes, it's, like, I think one of the things that we try to encourage artists not to do is look at the metrics, but we're going to look at the metrics because I think it's important to gain audience insight from, particularly if people are commenting, seeing what people are saying about what we're doing, and just engaging with those ideas, because you can't ignore them, let's be honest, in a world that's driven by social media. You definitely can't ignore the metrics completely, but you can't let them dictate the way that you feel about what's happened with something, because as you said, with the examples before with Seal and with Shouse and various other artists that released a song and then a couple of years later, that's when it suddenly hits. Well, there was one recently on a Netflix show as well, which was an old hit. It was a hit from 30 years ago or 40 years ago.
Running Up That Road by Kate Bush is a good example of that too.
Yeah.
It's songs that get resurgences because of again, like cultural connection.
So we'll be talking about metrics and how our stuff's doing in the grand scheme of things, and we'll probably start that from next week, like from our next discussion. Like we might talk, we're going to talk about how we're going to look at metrics and stuff today, but we will be kind of digging into them a bit on multiple platforms and figuring out how to consolidate them and all that kind of stuff. We'll be talking about kind of industry and cultural things, phenomenons that are happening at the time, purely because we like to talk about this stuff normally, but we like to talk about it in the context of what we're doing as well, because the cultural conversation is very much a part of what we are engaging with this project. And if we're not talking about what's happening out there in the world, are we actually doing that? So,
well, I mean, this is something that all artists do is understanding what else is out there.
Mm-hmm. And referencing it in their creation as well, as much as they think everything's unique.
Well, that's right. Everything's a dialogue.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's in music specifically, it's so multifactorial, right? You've got an audience that holds all these ideas in their head about what music is, what is good, what they're looking for at that particular moment in their own personal context.
Yep.
So they're in dialogue with a bunch of stuff that's informing what they're looking for. And then you've got an artist that holds all those same ideas in their head, and somehow you've got this piece of music that exists in between them as a bridge.
Yep.
And it's mediated by friends, critics, being used on TV shows, whatever other media's out there. It's this big multifactorial communication problem.
Yep.
That is it's real economics at work, really, because it's a marketplace. That you're producing. If you're a musician making things, you're producing a product that exists in a market space that is in a marketplace that's subject to all the same pressures that every other marketplace is. So the idea that you just put stuff out without considering what else is out there is crazy.
Yep.
Can you imagine Honda want to put out their new budget sedan or budget hatchback?
Yep.
And they don't want to look at anyone else on the market because they don't want to copy someone else's homework. Crazy.
Yeah.
We don't want to know what the price points are for the other cars. We're just going to put out what feels right.
Yeah.
It's a wild thing to do.
Yeah. But it happens in music all the time.
Constantly. In fact, it's probably the norm.
Yeah.
For most artists, or at least it's what's shown to, like, the outward messaging.
Yeah.
That's what the norm is.
Do you think that's like the prevailing kind of do you think the prevailing idea from artists is this art for art's sake thing that seems to be quite prevalent?
I think so, but I also think yes, in short, but I think it's part of the mythology of the artist too. That for musicians, there's this almost a cultural obsession with the troubadour sort of thing of you are this person who's, or like a flaneur or something. I don't know exactly what the right term would be, but someone who exists in this special societal space where you are more sensitive, more expressive, more something. You're different from the average person. You're tapped into some whatever.
Yeah.
And a lot of your outward, the way that you're engaging in and expressing yourself in culture is tied into that.
Yeah.
From the way that you dress, the way that whatever, like you're trying to establish yourself as being this something different and special. And so to do that, there is this. I think a lot of artists are attracted to this idea of being a hyper individual, and to build that mystique, you will say things like, "Oh, I don't listen to anything else. I only listen to my own stuff," or "I'm purely making the music that
I feel in my soul."
Yeah. And I have no influences. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Which of course is an insane position. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, like if someone was making something that was completely devoid of current like what's happened in culture and humanity in the last 2,000 years or whatever in music, it wouldn't be recognizable. And there are examples of this out there. I just can't remember the name of the band, but it was somewhere in the middle of America somewhere, a family, like an Amish family, like one of those kind of segregated communities. Their parents bought their kids. There was like 3 or 4 kids in the family. They bought them instruments, modern rock instruments, so drum kit. This was post 50s, when the trap kit was a thing. Bass guitar, like guitar, and just gave them to them without any context and got them to produce music. I can't remember the name of the band. I'll look it up and we can post it in comments or whatever. But there is video of these kids playing, and it's completely devoid of other than the instruments that they're using. It's really, really difficult to kind of engage with the music because it doesn't make sense. That it makes sense to them. If you listen to it, you can hear patterns and things that happen, but it's not beat based. It's not, some of the stuff that has happened in like contemporary art music, you might be able to kind of connect to it in some way. But these are artists who have no connection to culture, modern culture in any way, and therefore, as an audience engager, such as like me, there was nothing to connect with.
So do you think that they are without influence? Is that what you're saying?
No. I'm not saying that at all. Like, they were influenced obviously by the instruments which come from culture.
Yeah,
like,
precisely.
And both the guitarist and the bass player are playing the instruments in such a way that you would expect a person to play the instruments. The drummer has a weird technique, from what I remember, but so there is cultural influences in that respect. But I guess what I wanted to illustrate is that if you're creating stuff that's completely ignoring culture in every single way, it becomes alien and unlistenable by an audience. Yeah. Probably. Maybe not, but
well, apart from
for all intensive purposes,
anthropological significance.
Yeah.
It's you're not listening to it for enjoyment or for a purpose, for getting you pumped for the gym or whatever. No,
and but I think there'd be people who would argue against that point. Like some of my former professors and stuff would certainly argue the point of that some of this stuff is listenable, but that's coming from a place of extremely broad listening tastes.
Well, I mean, they're looking at everything through an academic lens.
Yeah. So curiosity is the primary driving factor there. So, if something is brand new, it's interesting.
A typical audience is not going to be looking for academic value.
No.
Things.
And if we're talking about sustainable careers in creativity, then, you could make art for art's sake for your whole life and be fulfilled and work a normal job and whatever and not give a shit.
Yeah.
But
and that could be success.
Yeah, that could be success, but it's not necessarily sustainable. You're not sustaining yourself on the work you're doing. You're sustaining yourself on other shit.
Well, yeah, it's not economically successful.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that probably brings us into talking about what the measures for success are for this.
Oh no, we haven't finished talking about
Have
all
we
the
not?
stuff we're gonna do. Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, we kind of got sidetracked, which is going to be a common thing in these discussions, I think. Um, yeah, so just coming back to what we're giving people real quick. So that was the industry and culture thing we were talking about, the cultural kind of conversation there, basically. And then the other part of the weekly discussion is this kind of our big discussion today is about what we're doing. That's our big discussion, effectively. But part of these weekly chats are going to be kind of digging into a particular topic, whatever that might be. We've got a few ideas written down, and we'll share them as they come. But they'll probably be part of the title, so people will know. So that's that particular part of the content. The other content that we'll be producing will be a combination of additional conversations and music content. And in fact, a lot of the other content we're going to be creating is going to be music-based content. So there'll be a kind of a songwriting process thing, which is kind of the initial conception of Frights songs, and then the demoing process, which is effectively kind of an extension of what FNL used to be. And then there'll be a discussion attached to that so that we can talk about why we made decisions and things like that. And there'll also be kind of studio sessions where we'll be getting in and writing stuff live so that people can see the process and kind of get in on that, and see the challenges of writing, basically. There will be kind of interactions with other artists that will sometimes be live and sometimes be pre-recorded, depending on what they are. There'll be collaborations, which will be part of the writing process, but also part of like remixes and stuff of the songs that are coming up. There'll be videos around the kind of main EP tracks that we're releasing, that kind of 8-week cycle. There'll be, a couple of covers and a couple of remixes, a couple of small videos that kind of highlight the song that we're about to release, and then the song itself, which is kind of the top of that hill every 8 weeks, and then we start again, basically, off a cliff and then back to the start. That's kind of to help build proficiency, but it's also to kind of allow us to just keep the ball rolling. We want people to share in the excitement we have for the music that we're making, and part of that is putting it out there. So that's basically a big overview of the content, and that's going to change and evolve as we figure stuff out and as we decide what works and what doesn't for what we're trying to do with our audiences, and as we try and figure out who our audiences are, because we're not pretending, like, we're literally starting from the start right now. We haven't dug into who our audience is. We haven't figured out the best way to put things out into the world, or a way of putting things out into the world. We haven't even picked a distribution service yet. So how do you get your stuff onto Spotify and things like that? We haven't done any of that.
We've also already broken our own rule in some ways, in that, like, we're talking about that the process of making music while considering ideas about like where it sits in a cultural landscape. And of course, the music that we have worked on as part of this project has come out of something completely different to that. It's come out of this process of trying as much as possible to not be thinking about that, to put ourselves into an experimental place, to just try things out and embrace the silliness, embrace the never-ending
but I think
sleepover energy.
I think we kind of absolve ourselves a little bit there by saying, like what we were talking about before, that every artist does what we're talking about. They just don't do it consciously. And I think intention is a big buzzword that we'll use quite a lot around this.
We've indulged in the lack of intention.
Yeah, we have. Maybe intentionally and maybe unintentionally at times, but we want to make it a lot more intentional than unintentional. We're not going to pretend like impulse is not going to find its way into what we're doing.
Yeah. As it should.
When Matt comes on, I'm sure we'll get his opinion on the matter.
That's right. He takes a much more spiritual approach.
Yeah.
He and I exist at very different ends of the spectrum.
And I live in the middle somewhere.
But the trick is that he and I have a lot of mutual respect for the way that each other work.
Yeah, and Matt was one of those people who was very challenged by what we like these ideas as they kind of evolved, and when we expressed them to him, at least immediate reaction was, no way. It wasn't really exactly like that, but roughly like that. But then a couple of days later, he came back and he was like, okay, I want to talk about this a bit more. And then we tried out some of the methods that we have developed over the last couple of months around these ideas when it comes to writing, and discovered that they were actually quite useful in the way that we intended them to be, which was, very cryptic. Sorry, guys. But
yeah, and I guess eventually when these things are a little bit like, because at the moment we're talking about stuff that's literally half cooked, like it's sketches on paper sort of thing of little methodologies and stuff that have just tumbled out of my head based on my experiences with doing that sort of thing. My background in more like user experience design and graphic design stuff comes from massive organizations where everything has to be measured and justified a lot of the time. And the focus of the teams that I've been a part of before has been building these what we used to call systems for repeatable genius, where if you stumbled across something clever, it's your kind of duty to deconstruct and understand ways to do it again if you can, or to at least get to the same piece of thinking quicker next time.
Yeah. And that's certainly something that we've talked about a lot, because one of your kind of big gripes with music just in general has been, why does it take so fucking long?
And it takes so long.
Yeah.
My God, it's slow. It's the slowest. Like for a discipline that is so immediate and ephemeral and time bound in the way that music is, that it exists in the moment, that it exists and nevermore, it is also the slowest. I think of things like other disciplines like pottery or wood turning or something, where you watch the thing form up in front of you and it is what it is. Music is that.
Mm-hmm.
But then as soon as you go to record it, it's suddenly, this 3-minute track is going to take 60 hours of work to make. And even then, we're still going to be tweaking it, and we're still not necessarily going to be happy with it. It may still end up in the bin, which is crazy.
Yeah.
It's an insane thing to think. And the opposite's true as well. You don't have to look hard to find tracks that someone's recorded on their phone in a bedroom and it's just poured out of them, and they go, yeah, great, that's fine.
Yeah, well, some of the biggest artists that we know have done that, like Jacob Collier. The song is The Sun Is In Your Eyes is recorded on a phone in a hotel room in LA, I think. And he intended to go, like, he was like, oh, that's a great demo, it's awesome, I've got the vibe and everything. And then went back to his studio in England and tried to produce it up, and just could not get it to where he wanted it to be, because he'd already captured that impulsive thing perfectly in that moment. And so it can go both ways, but being able to intentionally go, we're going to do it that way, and have it come off, it would be nice to, get closer to,
See, I look at something like that and go, yes, it's possible, and you could do it over and over again, and you could find your way conceptually to matter that lends itself to doing that, and you can steer into that. But then you have other points of view that go, well, no, that was this one special spiritual thing, and that exists over there in its special place.
Yes.
And there's no way to replicate it, and there's no point in even trying to replicate it, because it was so special. And I mean that I've got no time for that. It's a beautiful story, but
I mean, that's what it is, when we're talking about engaging with an audience in a certain way.
Yeah,
those meta narrative elements are really important, and
maybe that's exactly the thing, right? Is that if that was the thing, if you became, I'm the guy who makes these little songs in a hotel room, and they're really beautiful, but all of them have that central quality to them, then that central quality stops being special and becomes the norm. Whereas if your overall oeuvre is highly produced, very specific things,
Mm-hmm.
it gives it a contrast that it wouldn't otherwise have.
Mm.
However, then
There's always a but.
there is always a but, normally at the end.
Yeah.
The I get, like, I look at a band like OK Go, for example.
Yeah.
And they through their film clips, I don't know that necessarily their music is particularly different or
Well, it's definitely that first film clip was the thing that kind of broke them, the treadmill one.
Yeah.
That.
But all of their film clips after that had this same central idea of like, what is something that's out in the world that we can look at in a slightly like lateral thinking type of way
Mm-hmm.
and turn into something that's interesting to look at and conceptually fits with the kind of I don't want to say convoluted because that's not what it is, but like a complex, a nuanced kind of view of the world, which is what a lot of their songs were kind of about.
Mm-hmm.
And they did that, and it didn't make any of them less special. If anything, it built like the anticipation up because they positioned those elements correctly to work as this centralized concept.
Yeah, and their film clips very, very much are very beautiful pieces of creativity in themselves. Like, could put any music on them, maybe, and they would still hold up,
Yeah.
And I just realised something actually, because one of their film clips is a big Rube Goldberg machine kind of thing, which there's a Phoenix film clip that for Cool, or whichever one's Being Cool or whatever it's called, which is a similar
Trying to be cool,
or whatever that by one of my favorite production companies called Canada, which is a similar vibe. I'd be interested to know which one came first. It was probably the OK Go one.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Rube Goldberg machines are nothing new.
No, but the big, huge things like that in a film clip, like for music, is a kind of one of those cultural, synthesis things that has happened.
Yeah.
I don't think. Obviously you got the Wallace and Gromit one that would have come very, very early when it comes to visual media. But yeah, I mean, Rube Goldberg machines have been around for a long time. Oh, Charlie and the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. There's a Rube Goldberg machine in that as well, that's an old movie. Anyway, but in music, in the context of specifically kind of highlighting music in a creative way, there's interesting. Like, that's a thread right there. We just followed a little bit. Where Rube Goldberg machines in visual media.
Anyway. Time for a deep dive.
Yeah, I mean, that would be fun. I'd forgot about the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang one.
So would I. I don't know that I actually remember it. I've definitely seen the movie, but I don't remember.
It's like one of the really early scenes because the guy, the dad who drives Chitty Chitty
like
Bang
an inventor,
Bang.
right?
He's an inventor. He invents the car that flies and all that jazz. And there's that scene where he gets up in the morning and it makes him breakfast.
Right.
Yeah, and it's all practical effects. This however old that movie is, 60s, 50s, color.
Yeah.
It pretty amazing that practical effects like that were happening back then. Which I think's cool. Yeah. Anyway, so carry on. What were we talking about? We were talking about OK Go.
Yeah. Before that, we were going to go down the road of metrics around what criteria for success look like.
Yeah.
Right.
We probably need to define that for ourselves, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. There's.
I think the definitions of success is a really interesting one if we're talking about like this kind of gap between like practical and spiritual applications in music. Like, certainly kind of this idea of defining what success means for yourself comes from this kind of woo-woo business. You need to kind of figure this shit out ahead of time, otherwise you're going to stitch yourself up. Because like a lot of people in the modern society think success means monetary, financial success, which I think we're old enough to kind of realize is total bullshit in the grand scheme of things.
At the end of the day, you need to put food on your table, right? So there needs to be some.
There is
element.
a component that is that, but I think capitalism kind of encourages that everyone is
Yeah.
They're always after money.
It is also like just from a purely behavioral perspective, this whole idea of what gets measured gets managed.
Yeah.
Is a big thing too, right? And if you've got this big stonking number that you have to deal with every day whenever you go to the shops or whatever, and you see your bank balance,
Mm-hmm.
It becomes very easy to be obsessed with that, and for that to be the thing that you manage, right?
Yep.
I say stonking great number ambitiously, but the instinct to manage that more so than other possible things that you could manage is very understandable, because it's there as a number that gets bigger or smaller based on the things that you do.
Mm-hmm.
So of course it's what you fixate on.
Yep.
But yeah, as we say, like, it's certainly not the only measure for success.
Yeah.
We have but I'm gonna jot it down in my little notes here. So we've got financial. So what other measures for success do we want to think about?
Well, it's kind of hard to measure, but like, I think personal fulfillment is certainly a huge component of this. Like, and the next one I would say would be sustainability, or like ongoing creativity. So being able to be creative more frequently, you know. And certainly that's connected to the financial component, because I tend to use sustainable instead of financially successful as a kind of synonym in a way that implies slightly different things. And I do that because I think I've personally, for me, written several definitions for success over the years of my creative practice. And some of my earlier ones included a huge component that were financially minded, you know, like I will not work for, well, basically, I can't remember exactly how I wrote it, but part of it was I would always be compensated for the time that I was spending on things. Now, on a passion project, you're not going to get necessarily your rate, you know. If we look at some of the best or some of my favorite kind of filmmakers, like Wes Anderson, for instance, the money that he gets for those movies is significantly small compared to other Hollywood films of the same caliber. You know, I think Grand Budapest Hotel was somewhere between 25 and 40 million total budget.
Yeah, right.
You know, and I think maybe Asteroid City was like 25 million, and he's getting Scarlett Johansson and what's his name, Forrest Gump guy,
Tom
Hanks. You know, these are like AAA Hollywood actors.
Yeah.
On that budget, you know, like other big filmmakers like Chris Nolan or whatever wouldn't be able to get those people without paying significant amounts of money. And I think Ed Norton has said that like what he gets for a Wes Anderson film is like $5,000. That's his payment. That's his acting payment. $5,000. Ed Norton gets $5,000 on those films. Like, so that's a passion project for him. He might only have to turn up for 2 days or whatever. But still, like, you know, that's a significant difference between that and, say, I don't know, when he was the Hulk, he would have got paid significantly more, I would imagine, you know, because it was a studio film, you know, a mainstream comic film, you know. It's a huge difference in payment.
What's your point here?
You know, so around the financial, like using finance as a main definer for success, you'd miss out on projects.
Yeah, sure.
On really important projects or very exciting projects if that was the only reason that you went to work every day, you know.
Yeah.
So it's certainly something that I continue to caution people on.
So sure, there's a bit of a balancing act,
Yeah.
but for us to look at what we're doing here and go, yes, that is successful.
Yeah. Okay. So we got financial, we got personal fulfillment, we got sustainable and frequency of creativity. I guess that kind of constantly being curious thing, digging, like, you know, there's no end in sight. Like, I think the kind of choice to be an artist is a lifestyle choice, and it's not something that kind of ends, if that makes sense. there's no finish to it, or at least I don't think there is, not at the moment.
We seem to have some comments here from someone that we know. I recognize that avatar.
Yeah.
He ran out of characters, apparently.
Oh, he ran out of characters. There you go. Yeah. So, what was I talking about?
You need a boffin on hand to make us in the chat feel seen, validated, and powerful. Well, let me tell you, Sam, I am that boffin.
Yes. Simon is the boffin.
And speaking of, if anyone is watching and has critiques, please level them at us. As I said, we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, feel free to tell us. Yeah, so the feed curiosity thing, like if you're waking up excited to kind of go and make the thing, I feel seen and validated. If you're waking up in the morning and getting excited to kind of explore these things, then I feel like that's a good indicator for success. Like it's again, it's not numerical. You can't kind of go. I mean, probably you could have a 1-to-10 ratio or something to measure it, but
well, that's the difference between quantitative and qualitative measures, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like,
well, this is something that we have said we were going to talk about today. That quantitative and qualitative measurements. I mean, it would be similar to that. What's that medical thing for measuring pain?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The pain scale.
The pain scale, which is a bizarre way of measuring shit. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a classic qualitative measure.
Yeah.
You know, we're taking a value that is abstract.
Yeah.
And putting it into a framework where it's no longer abstract.
Yeah. I weirdly, I think this fits into the same thing, but and probably it probably fits into feed curiosity or an emotional kind of general emotional feeling around what we're doing. But like this like today, for instance, for me, if we're going to actually talk about this, I woke up feeling pretty keen and excited to kind of come and do this, even though like as we got closer to 11 o'clock, I was like, fuck. I was a little bit nervous. But someone, one of the guys from Bliss and Esso said to me, because I asked him one day when I was doing a recording for Triple J, I asked one of them, like how is it, like you go out on stage every day and like, are you nervous all the time? He's like, every single day. Yeah. And the reason if I wasn't nervous, I'd just stop doing it. And I kind of like took that on board as being an indicator for I was heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
If I wasn't nervous, then I shouldn't be doing it because I'm bored at that point, and the curiosity's gone. So today I had that, and I've had that a lot around the kind of activities we've been doing in creativity over the last 2 years. So I think that's, if we can figure out how to kind of measure that, and I guess that's part of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it should be part of like as any kind of checking. I'm hesitant to turn this too much into like a Flight of the Conchords, like, Josh present, Simon
band
present,
band meeting.
Exactly. But I think that having regular check-ins where you do effectively ask that question of like, are we headed in the right direction? How do we feel on a 1 to 10 scale, and chart it?
Yeah.
Can tell you lots. Like if you can look at something and go, oh yeah, I'm in a funk. It's very different to just I'm just going about doing the thing that I'm doing and not being critical about it in any way. This is why systems and processes are important. Damn it.
Yes, I agree. Well, and one might say habits.
Yeah, it's definitely part of that.
Creative habits and life habits are kind of really important. Yeah. Cool. All right. I don't know. Do you have anything else to add to that? We've got financial fulfillment, sustainable, curiosity. Do you have anything else to add to that?
Of metrics, I think, I've got loads to add to this. So I guess, so audience size.
Yeah. Okay. We'll get into like hard metrics now.
Yeah.
I kind of ignore these. So this is
audience size. So I want to talk about things like, it's it's very easy to look at that sort of thing, and talking about metrics that you can fixate on in the music industry. That's an easy one. Like you
Spotify
literally
streams.
open Spotify, and there it is, streaming at you.
How many streams did you get this month? 2.
And it's part of the artist wrapped as well. At the end of the year, it goes, you've been streamed in this many countries by this many people, and blah blah blah.
And Spotify is very good at that because they've built their whole model around metrics, not just metrics around plays and stuff, but also metrics around the consideration of how songs fit together in culture. And that's kind of why they're so good at making these automated playlists, is that they've figured out how to connect a Christmas song in the middle of the year to another song, and how does that fit in a playlist? Like all those metrics they're very good at that.
Yeah, and there's this really interesting stuff. If you ever deep dive on Spotify history, there's great things from like 10 years ago. The old TED Talks and things from companies that they acquired, where they talk about that emerging technology, which of course now is just it totally different. It'd be so driven by things like AI and other emerging tech. But back then, they were doing things like building algorithmic ways to figure out different qualities of a song. So the big thing that came out of it was the danceability score. That every song had this danceability metric as part of a series of lots of other different metrics. But that influences this whole thing about how things fit together, right? And they were even talking about things like hit prediction. So you could have a song that shows up, and they would be able to predict based on these measures how popular it was going to be. And of course that means that when people are listening to the automated playlists like Discover Weekly and whatever, Spotify feels better than other streaming platforms.
It does,
because it can give you things that you don't even know that you want yet, because it doesn't have to wait for it to be validated as a hit to then go, oh, here's something you might like. It goes, no, it's gonna be a hit because it is similar to stuff that is already a hit, and even for you specifically represents a hit, but it's 30% difference, 20% different. So it's gonna feel exciting and interesting and new. To you. So here it is. And if you're someone who fits into the mold of liking popular music or whatever, even more so, it's even more powerful. So having these different measures made them what is partially responsible for them being the successful company that they are. Obviously there was a whole bunch of other market forces at play. This is the days of Napster and Rhapsody and Pandora and all there was a real
LimeWire.
It's easy to forget that Spotify existed in such a complex ecosystem of different ways to stream music. iTunes as well was obviously the incumbent.
I mean, iTunes kind of was that the noughties way of distributing music, and then Spotify kind of came out and then took over in the 2010s.
So the idea that this startup could just come out of Sweden and totally topple the Goliath in the room, right, of Apple is a wild thing.
And they haven't recovered from that. They're trying their hardest, but they're not doing what Spotify are doing. They're not, and none of the other platforms, I would argue, that I've engaged with, like Tidal, and this is not me stoking the flames of Spotify at all, because I have a lot of big problems with how they do business, but the way that their algorithms work are incredible compared to other music distribution services. And they're so far ahead in that respect compared to the other ones that there's just, it's going to be, they have to be a brand new company, new technology, major disruption for it to change it.
And I mean, some would argue that's kind of what TikTok is.
And I mean, they've got a whole music platform basically that, they've got record label, they've got a distribution service, obviously,
they've got a captive audience.
They have a massive captive audience.
But again, like it works fundamentally differently to to the way the existing platforms do.
Yeah.
And when it goes through those network effects and becomes this thing,
Mm-hmm.
this elephant in the room, it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
It's too late for Spotify to try to change and have a humanistic component to how it recommends things in the way that TikTok does, where you've got actual people doing things.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally too late. But we also know that you could have walked into Spotify 5 years ago and shown them a bunch of data about like, hey, human recommendations really mean something to people. This is one of the fundamental ways in which people value and know to value an idea. Social is this social proofing thing. Your platform has zero of this.
Mm-hmm.
Why? How can we build it in? And you would have got laughed out of the room. But now that's probably all they're talking about is how can we humanize our service? How can we whatever? Because they know that like they've done the innovation. They're sitting at the top of that curve, and now they will be seeing the starts of that decline, and they have that choice about, do we re-innovate or do we just cruise, extract the value out of the company, and then go, well, we just don't exist anymore in 15 years.
Yeah, well, they're definitely spending money like crazy in the last couple of years, that's for sure. So
yeah, well, they're still making acquisitions. They're acquiring things. They've grown into podcasts
and
audiobooks. Yeah. So they're definitely diversifying. But is that just part of the slow cruise into irrelevancy, or is that
something new is going to come out of it?
Yeah.
All right. So audience.
So things
size.
like audience size. I think like critical response. So that's again like that's a very
when we're saying critical response, are we talking about like engagement from professional critics, or are we talking about just in general across both consumers and professionals?
Well, I think that's both. So something like an album review, is definitely something that falls into critical response. But also, if you've got, we will in time as audience grows, we will have data about likes and dislikes, or whether a particular thing that we've done has a high click-through ratio or a low click-through ratio. It might have high viewership but low engagement.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna write as part of audience size and critical response, I'm gonna add a little B point of engagement.
Yeah. Okay.
Because that's a kind of a mix of the two.
Yeah.
I've just forgotten how to spell completely, apparently.
Engagement.
Like
it sounds. That's one of the easy English words coming from a guy who can't spell.
I've added an N in there in the middle for no reason. Anyway,
don't worry about it.
Whatever.
You're all good, bud.
It's my notes, not your notes.
That's right.
It's not the Oxford English Dictionary's notes. It's my notes.
Oh, you know my opinions on communication.
I know your opinion and your ability around spelling.
As long as people understand what you're writing, you're doing it right.
That's right. You're communicating.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right. Other measurements, metrics. We've talked about audience. We've talked about critical response. Would engagement kind of would engagement kind of cover things like cross media? I guess syncs in films and things like that, like cross media interactions.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So I guess like
AKA Seal in Batman Forever.
I'm going to call that cultural cut through.
There you go.
Or cultural footprint. We can call it lots of different things. Let's go footprint. That's a bit nicer. Cultural footprint. So yeah, that's absolutely it. Is it being used in things? I mean, engagement's kind of part of that. If we think of things like, are people using it on platforms like TikTok? Are people putting it in playlists on Spotify?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. That's kind of that is engagement. It's also cultural cut through. It speaks to the other, right?
Yeah.
Well, speaking, I mean, we talked about songs before that had been hits and then cut through again. Like that guy. This is in the early COVID times, cruising around on his skateboard with his bottle of cranberry juice with Fleetwood Mac playing in the background. And
don't know if I saw that.
Don't know if you've come across that one. It was a whole thing, whole story.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was what was the song? I can't remember.
Don't know.
The one that goes. He says, describing lots of Fleetwood Mac's back catalogue. Uh,
Dreams.
Dreams.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah. Man, Google's so good. Dogface out there here vibing to Fleetwood Mac. Dreams while enjoying his orange spray cranberry juice. I must have missed this.
This was a whole thing, but that that represents that song having that kind of cultural footprint, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's Landon. So we can definitely look at that as a metric for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are the kind of I think it's kind of fun. We've got this real division in the middle of like what's important to you, what's important to me.
Well, yeah, look, I mean, I think this is part of it because like we do come from different perspectives, and that's where this is quite interesting. And I think where a lot of people are going to go, nah, you shouldn't be talking about this stuff because you're not a musician. How would you know? I think music, but like, I mean, we talk about music a lot because that's where we're coming from, but I think it's probably across most artistic kind of things, except for maybe film, where auteurs are actually thinking about all the disciplines all the time anyway, because that's what directors would do.
Mm-hmm.
They need to do that to make good films, because they incorporate, film is kind of one of those things that incorporates everything, and you need to know. But I would say that a lot of other art forms that are specific, like music, there's this kind of intentional kind of blindness around, other perspectives from different art forms, and art forms can mean anything, in that respect. So I don't have a problem with seeing divisions like that in these conversations, because that's going to happen. We're different people. And the interesting stuff happens when these ideas kind of hit each other and make new stuff.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, part of the whole synthesis part.
Yeah.
We all have blind spots as well, none of us are as smart as all of us.
No. In fact, we're all dumb. And that's a good place to start from. Or at least I think I'm pretty dumb about it. So.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, just a bunch of idiots out here being
living
stupids.
up to my modest name.
But we live in stupid times, so who better to make art to represent those stupid times than the stupids?
Yeah, okay, I can get behind that. Metrics. Do we have anything else right now?
I think those are really those are the big ones.
Yeah,
right?
I think we can safely say that we'll be expanding and nuancing this list every week anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a good place to start.
Yeah, and in terms of measuring these things, I think everything there can be measured in a very kind of direct way. Financial and audience size is obvious, and engagement as well. A lot of that stuff comes from the platforms themselves. They will tell us about these things. We may have to do some work in charting them, but those things are provided to you just through the process of putting things out.
Yeah.
Things like fulfillment, sustainable, frequent creativity, feeding curiosity, critical response, and cultural footprint, those things are less obvious, and they sit in a bit of a gradient there. Like critical response is kind of somewhere in the middle. There will be things that are quantitative measures. Hey, what is Pitchfork given our new release? Is it best music of the week? Whatever.
I mean, you could even step back from that and say how many people actually engaged with this new track. Like,
yeah, well, that's engagement.
Well, I mean, we're not engaged, but I mean, like, how many critics wrote about this? I think probably what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
Pitchfork may have given it a 3 out of 10 or whatever because it was dog shit.
Or because they're Pitchfork. And,
okay.
Like to be divisive sometimes.
Maybe, yeah, that's true. Or whatever, but it could be just the number of critics that kind of jumped on board.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And, if you've got, like podcasts having conversations about it, you're doing a good job. Like, we've had conversations around that Beyonce album that just came out in this vein, like that if we kind of broadcast it would be considered to be one of those critiques, not that anyone would necessarily listen to it and give a shit, but we have pretty strong opinions on that record, and I think I would argue it's pretty easy to measure that.
Positive opinions. Let's
Yes, positive
strong
opinions.
positive opinions on that.
Yes. Yeah. Whereas I think the general critical response from and the audience has been maybe the opposite.
I'm not sure about that. I think the general audience response has been overwhelmingly positive.
Okay.
Has been my understanding.
Maybe it's just the people I know.
Oh, okay,
who
yeah,
are
right.
Beyonce fans.
That says more about your networks than
Yeah,
it does about.
Probably about the broader world.
That's true. Like that's part of the mix, though, right?
Yeah.
It's like everyone. This is kind of the idea: is everyone has their echo chambers, so to speak. Everyone has their network of people around them who contribute meaning to their lives.
Yeah.
And help them shape what's meaningful to them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's this idea of you're a product of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
So, if the 5 people who are closest to you all think that an album is garbage,
I would still probably listen to it. Films, bit different. I wouldn't go and see a film. I don't necessarily agree with people's opinions on music, so I'll always go and listen to something if I think I want to listen to it.
Yeah, the time investment to listening to a piece of music or whatever, even an album, is typically a lot less than a film.
Yeah, true.
Film requires you to engage all your senses for 2 hours.
Yeah.
It is a big ask.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we kind of found a natural end to that part of the conversation.
Oh, well, hang on. I did want to add one more point, which is that on the stuff that is more qualitative, we've come kind of full circle about the reason that we're doing these weekly chats is it gives us an opportunity to have these structured check-ins about, hey, is this feeling fulfilled to you? Are we on schedule for frequent releasing?
Well, speaking of that, how did you feel about coming and doing this today?
Well, funnily enough, when you talk about nervous things, I haven't felt nervous about this at all.
Oh, well.
Why
are you here?
because I feel like I can see the value in it.
Yeah. Okay.
And
I honestly wouldn't expect you to feel nervous.
Do I feel anything anymore?
Exactly. I don't know if you're capable of such a feeling.
Oh, don't be silly. Of course I'm capable of nervousness.
You're level like a spirit.
I think I'm realistic about this sort of stuff. Like I know that I'm throwing myself into a field where I have no real form. You know,
You've written some good lyrics though.
I mean, in terms of the live streaming stuff,
yeah.
I mean, I kind of weirdly, I feel like I have plenty of form in the music stuff because I have been a pretty pretty vocal critique.
Yeah.
I have spent a lot of time around musicians.
Yeah.
I have. It's not like I haven't engaged in that stuff before.
Yeah.
And I also feel like the only barrier to being a musician is literally calling yourself a musician. So.
Well, yeah, I'd say that. And certainly, like, some of the interactions I've had over the last couple of months demonstrate that some bands are actually made up of, who are incredibly musical bands, are made up of people who aren't musicians or don't consider themselves to be musicians, like Def Effects, Sean Lowry, who's a visual artist, I think, but also he's definitely a musician.
Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting idea, but I was excited. I was nervous and excited.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
But anyway, a chance to the point is that it gives us a chance to consolidate those ideas into a number, stick it in an Excel sheet, chart it, and measure on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 to 50, whatever. Little smiley faces.
Well, I mean that's what the pain scale one is. Yeah. Do they look like this?
That's right. We'll use that. How fulfilled are you looking?
Yeah.
One's crying.
One is crying and one is like jumping up and down with ecstasy.
That's right. Star eyes emoji.
Yeah.
But that stuff will be, as it becomes richer, will become interesting over time.
Yeah.
I think it's so easy to find examples of bands where they say like, oh yeah, I had this big hit and I didn't feel any different. In fact, I felt worse. You know? How different would that have been if they were charting their fulfillment?
Yeah.
Effectively journaling is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, like one of the guys that I know, he does a 5-minute journal where he does that. It's like how, on a scale of 1 to 5, how good did I feel today about what I did?
Yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera. Something along those lines. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he would actually chart it on a line with the dates.
Yeah.
And you could see these natural kind of ebbs and flows.
Mm.
You know.
So,
Yep.
So
We'll keep coming back.
we'll
to
keep
that.
coming back to measurability, but I think it's going to be something that is very going to be useful and rich over time. It will become very rich data.
Excellent.
I'm particularly interested to see if we have crossovers, where this part of the process was very unfulfilling for me, but very fulfilling for you guys, or
Yeah.
vice.
I definitely think it's going to be different.
And it should be.
Yeah.
We're all different humans.
Mm-hmm.
We shouldn't all be
The same.
of a type. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of that kind of part of the chat, which is just a general discussion and what we're going to be doing. Do we want to get on to talking about? Do we want to do an industry and culture talk today?
I think we should, but we'll keep it short.
Yeah.
Keep it short.
We've got about 20 minutes, I reckon.
All right. So part of what
10
we wanted
past.
to feed into these weekly discussions is, as part of keeping ourselves engaged with industry stuff,
Mm-hmm.
is to talk about exactly that, industry and culture kind of things. So what I had jotted down in my notes as the big idea, we'll come back to a big idea each week. And so these can be things around, should bands be made up of acts with less musicians, or the role of AI, or whatever it happens to be. As news comes out throughout the weeks, we'll be able to talk about stuff.
Yeah.
But for this first silly little one where we've got functionally zero audience,
It's probably a good thing we don't have an audience.
I wanted to. Obviously, there's been a big album release this week, which is from our friend Taylor Swift.
Yes.
And so, at the risk of being, two white guys in their 30s talking about a Taylor Swift record and having opinions on it,
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's important on the other side of that coin to be thinking about us as music creators, and we should have opinions on this sort of stuff.
Yeah,
we
I
should
think
have
so.
thoughts.
I haven't listened to the album yet, so but I have seen the Fortnite film clip, which I've enjoyed.
Uh-huh.
But I intend to listen to the album. So
Yeah, and I think there's, even without listening to it, we can have some meta conversation around Taylor Swift. And again,
so.
if anyone, I see we have a very modest audience across the platforms. So if anyone in chat wants to weigh in as well, I invite you to, absolutely. I will be reading and responding. But I think we can talk in a meta sense about Taylor Swift as a cultural force at large.
Yeah, because I think we can all agree that she has a really good idea of what she wants to do and what she's doing in music. She's done some very interesting things over the years when it comes to engaging with her audience and dealing with diversity and playing with genre.
We can talk about a lot of this stuff in relationship to these metrics too, in fact. So I think by any measure that you choose to look at Taylor Swift through, it's hard to not view her output as being massively successful,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this is someone who has amassed a financial fortune through their artistic output, which can, I think it's hard to point to someone who has done that and not celebrate them.
Mm-hmm.
Like she is absolutely worthy of being celebrated and worthy of the spot that she's got in a pantheon, in the pantheon of music. But with the exception to that rule I just stated, being that you do have people that amass audiences and financial fortunes through spreading ideas around hate and around whatever.
Mm-hmm.
These negative qualities of humanity. So conversely, there are people out there who have these platforms that maybe shouldn't be celebrated. So I'm gonna walk that point right back.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about those kinds of people.
But in the case of a Taylor Swift, I mean, this is someone who is producing artwork that is very personal to them. Effectively, her whole career is these journal entries, right?
Yeah.
That's what her songs are, apart from there's maybe a few examples there that we can point to as being overtly written to court a larger audience or like pop success. So
Yep.
things like a Shake It Off, for example.
Mhm.
You know, those songs like that have definitely been made to maximize that danceability score on Spotify, and rightfully so. You know,
Oh, I think that's important, obviously.
but they are also a glaring omission from the new album.
Yeah.
Right. This is someone who has come, and that's what jumped out to me most listening to her new album. And in fact, even the couple before it they're all in this more, I suppose, like somber space. There's definitely elements of light and celebration in them, but they don't have this overt, highly saturated, like, you know, Technicolor vibe of some of the more poppy moments of her previous work.
Mm-hmm.
And it speaks to this curve that all artists go on, right? Of if you achieve success, you are naturally going to start instead of referring to pop music as an entire entity.
Yep.
You're naturally going to start being more in dialogue with your own work.
Yep.
Than you are with just the greater world. And of course, the way that critics will talk about it will mirror that.
Yep.
That as you amass success, critics will be talking about you as someone who has this big tail of work, and are constantly in comparison with that. If you move in one direction versus another direction, it's going to be that direction versus that direction in relation to your old work.
Yep.
Whereas if you're a new artist, it's just what direction are you headed in.
Yep.
So it's natural that is this kind of Ouroboros of effects. It's a feedback loop.
Yeah.
So she's very much down that path, and the critique of the album that I've heard is doing exactly that same thing. You know, it's not talking about, how does this sound in relationship to Lana Del Rey or a Lorde or someone else who exists in kind of sonically similar spaces.
Mm-hmm.
It's always about Taylor Swift versus Taylor Swift, with the exception of where there's actual features. So Florence and the Machine,
Post
Malone. You know, then you can talk about
how they engage with each other. Yeah. And how their music, it kind of interacts.
And so it invites those sort of things for sure.
Which I think is important. I think that's one of the things that Gorillaz does quite well, and why we kind of look to that their cultural interactions, because a big part of what they do is collaborate.
Yeah.
You know, whereas I would say that that's not necessarily true of someone like Taylor Swift. Yes, she does collaborate, I would say that a lot of her music is born out of excessive amounts of collaboration, but it's just not clearly on the surface. You know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. In that, like, she has very strong
Taylor Swift
musical collaboration.
Yeah, really strong.
So like Jack Antonoff, like the
Max Martin. You know, like those are like you said, those interactions with other music professionals, not so much other artists, but other music professionals have been a huge part of her career. You know, which I think they are most artists, but they just don't talk about it.
Yeah. And I mean Desna in this conversation as well from the National, being like has featured on the last 3, I think, Taylor Swift records.
Yeah.
So you know these are, and that to me is always fun. Is like this combination of, you think of bands like the National being quite serious and cerebral.
Yeah.
And then you think of someone like Jack Antonoff and bands like Fun. And those again, like they're so incredibly cool.
Yeah.
And Taylor Swift somehow exists in both and neither of those places as her like it's so easy to look at Taylor Swift as as being this, you know, pop and everything else being secondary. Sam is suggesting we check out Anthony Fantano's review of her new album, which is one that I haven't looked at yet. So there you go. But yeah, I agree. I'm coming into this fairly cold myself. I've looked at some, but definitely not a wide set of the reviews around this album. On the whole, I have some issues with the album. I'll come down to my own personal opinions now, but
Yeah.
the like I always want to like Taylor Swift, or like she even though she's not my
You're not part of her audience.
I'm not part of her audience, and the music's very much like not for me typically.
Yes.
I always have this strong bias toward wanting to like it. And the I couldn't find a way in on this album, which has kind of annoyed me a little bit, because I've just finished saying that I think of this is kind of like annoyingly cool and cerebral, being these two things that I don't necessarily associate, or I don't see as the like wider cultural association with Taylor Swift. But I think that she actually is those things. I think she is actually like someone who is incredibly clever. And on this album, I kind of feel like she's taken a step in that direction, to be more literary, to make these overt allusions to people, like Patti Smith and these other, I guess, like trailblazers who have kind of set the scene before her in these spaces that she occupies. But it's done in such a surface way. Like it's almost, it feels like she's pulled punches to me. And I wish she didn't. I wish there was more allusions that were made in a more kind of traditional literary way, where it is playing that game of like a literary allusion, literally. So it's a reference to a line, but changing its form, which she doesn't do. She just name checks and moves on.
Yeah.
So to me, it feels very much like there's the integration of those ideas hasn't happened. It feels like she wants to take a step in that direction, but
hasn't done it.
But
Do you think that's like a symptom of the amount of touring she's been doing, or
probably.
worrying about fan base a lot more now than she used to?
No, I think the worrying about fan base thing is gone for her.
Yeah.
The fact that she's making the type of music that she's making, to me, as an observer, feels like she has she's gotten comfortable with the idea that she has this large audience that is going to pay attention to her no matter what she does, and she's using that to like she is using that in a responsible way to do more interesting things. She's doing things like adding third choruses onto songs that you normally wouldn't, because it's just at that point a lot of people are going to tune out. So that she's gone against the conventional wisdom of music production in ways like that I've noticed. But it hasn't. She hasn't, in my opinion, hasn't gone far enough. Like I would have kind of expected there to be something that was more. I don't want to say artful, but like just pushing the boundaries a bit more, to do something that's more unexpected, to do more that is more challenging to her fan base. Like the fact that these songs are still based in this, I'm writing my diary entries, I'm writing about these relationships that I had, and a less in the storytelling kind of space. I think the most successful parts of the album do that. You know, there are moments in the album that are very much storytelling, almost feel like returns to kind of a country space.
Mm-hmm.
And that stuff for her, I think, is phenomenally successful on this album. But those moments are pretty few and far between.
Yeah. Well, doesn't help that there's 30-something tracks on the record, you know.
That too, yeah. I would have. I think an edit would have been in order for sure.
Yeah.
And the ways that she's done that previously have also been really successful. Like Midnights, I think, was the name of the album, where she had a concise release and then like an extended version.
Yeah.
And
for the fans.
Yeah. This album.
Deluxe.
I feel like I almost got flashbacks to there was a Ben Folds album that came out. Weird parallel to draw. Super Sunny Speed Graphic was the name of that album, and it was 3 or 4 EPs that he'd put out over the past year or whatever, and they were just mushed together.
Yeah.
And of course, it felt distracted and unconsolidated.
Yeah, well, it wasn't really considered because it's just basically throwing everything out there.
And that's what this felt like. I felt like, and you know, in that case, I had I'd enjoyed listening to those EPs, and then I listened to the album together and was like, oh, there's a weirdness here.
Well, that's where I like something like Mac DeMarco, where he does put out his demos, but they're framed and intentionally kind of so as these are all the demos that went onto this record, and then you get to hear the original songs, some of the original songs and what they turned into. You know,
I feel like
where that's a bit, you know, I don't think Taylor Swift would do that.
I think she should.
Yeah.
You know, I reckon that this release to me, which again, like it's in such who cares territory because like
it's not you.
It's not for me.
No.
But I feel like this release with no changes to the music could have swayed someone like me to being a bigger fan of hers by having a different release strategy. I genuinely feel like if it came out as little bite-sized like 4-track EPs, even with very similar branding, but taking us through an arc over time.
Yeah.
Of going like, I'm gonna release 10 3-track EPs or whatever, you know, a smaller set of 4 or 5-track, whatever. But these little chunks and just do it once a month. That's telling us this overarching story from the last few years of her life.
Yeah. Serializing it basically.
But essentially, but making each one of those feel really consolidated and as part of a larger arc. I think that could have been a really incredibly beautiful thing. That doing it all as one big release feels like it's too distracted and too much to take on board at once and too bitsy from everywhere.
But maybe in that respect it could be because you're coming into it from a, you know, like not a fan's perspective. Maybe
you're like a semi-fan, like I'm a warm fan.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
But like a super fan would. You know, and let's be honest, like most Taylor Swift fans are pretty super fanny, you know, like they're going to listen to it regardless of how consolidated it feels, you know, and I think, that's the kind of discussion that we've been having, like she can do anything she wants. So why does she need to? That's the question, you know, and like, I think from our perspective is like, for our own fulfillment as artists, we would feel the need to do something like what you're talking about. But does she feel the need to do that? Does she want to do that? You know, if there's no intention behind wanting to do something like that, and she's literally only talking to her hardcore fans, then why would she do that?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about goals and measurability and stuff, like Taylor Swift famously is someone who goes from like, I am in touring mode, I am in album release mode, I am back in touring mode.
Yeah.
So to me, this
classic
feels,
album cycle stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and it feels like this release is setting up the it's setting up the next tour.
Yeah, okay.
You know, and maybe you don't get to do that quite so much if you go, well, I'm not going to tour for the next however long because I'm going to do this 6 release set.
Yeah.
that's going to come out monthly. So I'm not
Yeah.
going to tour for the next 6 months.
Yeah. And touring while, making hay while the sun's shining kind of thing too, I think is certainly something that she probably is thinking about a lot because,
So of course that changes those measures. But if we talk about these other things, right? Like, so sustainable, frequent creativity
mm-hmm.
is her career sustainable? Like, how many albums does she have left? Is she someone who you think is going to still be releasing when they're
I don't
in
know.
their 50s?
She could very well. I don't think she's going anywhere.
You don't reckon? You don't reckon she's going to run out of puff?
Nah, I don't think so. Like, I mean, she's pretty supported, and
I hope so.
like, and she seems pretty level-headed when it comes to the way that she interacts with the industry. She doesn't strike me as someone who's out there getting high all day long and burning the wick at both ends in that respect. I'm like, as someone who works very hard, I think she's a workaholic in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But she's very well supported, so she's able to kind of get away with that. She also is lucky enough to be flush with cash and flies around in private jets and stuff like that, and that obviously adds a certain amount of it kind of offsets that burnout that, say, a lot of other artists who don't have those that ability, the luxuries. Well, you call them luxuries, but like facilities, I think is probably a better word, because they can't do it, and therefore they end up at burnout quicker. She's also surrounded by a significant amount of buffer when it comes to fan base. Like, even critics turning around and saying, "Oh, this album could have been better." Her fans don't give a fuck. Like, her fans will back her all the way, and that's awesome for her. So I think
it is awesome for her, but I like at the same time,
it's problematic as well.
Yeah, I worry about stuff, just the stuff that's poured out for us here, right? Like, we're talking about fulfillment and feeding curiosity and stuff. Like,
But she could be getting that in other ways. That's not necessarily through her music.
Absolutely, yeah. I think, but that represents a challenge, right? If you're someone who has spent a significant amount of time using your artistic output to do those things, like, naturally, as a career grows, there's always going to be these changing of gears between different things. Yeah. And I think a lot of careers see their success or failure on their ability to do that.
Well, maybe this record is kind of mid-changing of gears. Maybe that's why it's not hitting as hard, as because she's kind of come to this new position, and she hasn't quite figured it out yet.
Maybe.
And this record is...
For me, if I'm looking at these things, I don't feel like it's a curious record, and I don't feel like it's a fulfilled record.
From your perspective,
completely speculative, right? Like, I've got no real insight into this at all.
Well, we can definitely say that the audience and it's engaged in critical response. A lot of people have written about it and talked about it. We're talking about it right now. The audience size is, we can...
Phenomenal.
Absolutely.
And the cultural footprint as well will be...
Well, this video, this Fortnite video, which came out 5 days ago, has 40 million views.
Yeah.
I don't think she's worried about the audience.
No, it's...
the sustainability's there, I think, and the financial kind of satisfaction is certainly there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know about fulfillment. I agree with you. I don't know about fulfillment or the curiosity thing, which I think go kind of hand in hand in a lot of ways. Yeah, but, I don't think that's going to prevent her from coming back and doing another record. She doesn't listen. She's very reactant to people challenging her in a good way. Like, she doesn't go and wallow, and in my experience of seeing her engage with the public, she's not the kind of person who's going to turn around and go, "Oh, that person said a mean thing about me, I'm not going to do another record." She's going to do another record just to spite them.
And that's where her best records have come from.
Totally. And you can see it in the re-recording of all the songs and the breakup album and all that. Like, there's some really good stuff there. Otherwise she wouldn't have the fan base.
Speaking of breakup albums, this very much is. It's like a triple breakup album. It's a double album that's a triple breakup album. But those, genuinely, I feel like those are the weaker spots. The songs that are overtly about an ex or like a breakup situation or whatever, those are pretty skippable for me. I
Yeah.
I kind of feel because and some of it's down to just like technical stuff. I feel like uh when the Taylor Swift stuff that I respond to personally,
Yeah.
uh and I can't overstate this enough. Like I'm so aware that I'm just like a dude talking about Taylor Swift right now. Fuck me. But um my opinion does not matter in this space whatsoever, is what I'm trying to say. But
Okay.
I'm laboring the point.
Don't
now,
put
am I?
yourself down like that.
Um,
It's fine. You're allowed to have an opinion.
yeah, I'm trying to come to it as like as a fellow practitioner rather than a consumer.
Yeah.
I suppose is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But the if I had the just purely from a technical perspective, if I could open my mouth and sound like Taylor Swift sounds,
Mm-hmm.
the stuff that I would be chasing is those really bright, clear moments, because that to me is the stuff that is most resonant.
Yeah.
That's where I feel like she's at her best.
So do you feel like this record's indulgent?
Yes.
Okay.
In a word, yeah.
Yeah.
I do feel like it's indulgent. And I think the fact that it is 30 tracks is kind of the first clue on that.
Yeah.
The fact that it's called like the Tortured Poets Department is that.
Yeah.
You know.
That certainly stinks of that what I just said.
Yeah. And look, to some extent, like there's a way to read this release in my mind that's kind of like the kind of the freedom that comes with like indulging in bad taste. And I think there's a lot of that on this record. There's moments of it that feel real pulpy. There's moments on it that feel very like tropey.
Yeah.
In a way that and even just the kind of like self there's some overt self references in there. There's self awareness to it.
Mm-hmm.
That can't help but be read as like indulgent. But does it? I don't know that it necessarily goes far enough around to be like I am being deliberately lacking in tact, and I'm playing. I don't know that it goes far enough to be that like I'm deliberately playing with the idea of taste.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can get behind that.
All right. That'll give you something to think about when you listen to it.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's
because
we could keep talking about it.
Of course.
And I could definitely had more questions about it, but I think just in the interests of finishing up for today, because we've been on for about 2 hours, I think we need to.
I'm hungry. I want lunch.
To call it quits. So I guess thanks for joining us, those who did, and those who watch this later. Thanks for suffering through our first ever production. So we'll just sign off now. You can find us on all the major platforms. We're kind of working towards streaming on basically everything that has a live platform. Right now we're on Twitch, Kick, YouTube, and X. Soon to be followed by TikTok and Instagram, and there might be some others later on, but they're the kind of places that you can find us. The handle that that's on every platform is FRIGHTS_music. And you can follow us there and subscribe and all that jazz. So the other thing that's important is that we will be publishing schedules as we move forward. We haven't kind of come to term, like completely framed out what we're going to do schedule wise for these broadcasts and stuff. So the best way to kind of see when we're going to be doing the next one is to jump on the main social media platforms like Instagram or X to follow us.
Yeah, the schedules will be published everywhere. They all have scheduling features. So
you'll see when we're going to be streaming next.
So give us a little subscribe, give us a little follow on the platforms.
Like and subscribe. Yeah.
Hit the bell.
Yes, that's the one.
On YouTube.
Unironically. As
yes.
I've written down here.
Oh gosh.
Yes. So we'll be back next week, and I'm Josh. This is Simon. We'll talk to you soon.
We'll have Matt at some point in the middle here.
You'll be in
imagine a sandy-haired fellow.
Yeah, lovely human.
Cool. All right.